you check the children?
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Horror Show. I'm Cecil Laird.
You got Jaime Fuego here.
And we are here to discuss a brand new movie release, which didn't get any press screening, at least that we were invited to, so I don't know, it was kind of odd, but we're here to talk about a pretty big release called Insidious the Red Door, which is Insidious 5. It's also supposedly the film that is wrapping up the whole story that basically took mostly place in episodes 1 and 2. Chapter 1 and 2, I should say. Chapters 3 and 4 were prequels to chapters 1 and 2 and don't really have much of a place with regards to Insidious the Red Door, but this is very much a sequel to the second film in the franchise, and we're here to talk about it. And I'm going to start off by saying I had an okay time with this movie. I think it wasn't the most driven film, right? Like, you were just kind of waiting for things to happen a lot of the time, but I still enjoyed revisiting the Lambert family, and I liked seeing. It's cool that nowadays, you know, it's becoming more and more normalized to see sequels more than a decade after the last installment, and I kind of like that about this film because you find out that there's a lot that happened in the interim, and they play with that.
Grew up, man.
yeah, exactly. But everyone grew up, and, you know, relationships grow as well, and sometimes they grow apart, and it's an interesting situation. And I liked how the film played out. Again, I don't think it's anything that could be considered wholly unique in its execution, but it was still entertaining enough. I jumped at a couple of parts. I didn't jump as much as I did in The Boogeyman, but I still jumped at a couple of parts, and I still liked seeing how the story played out. It didn't overstay its welcome. It was a relatively short film by comparison to a lot of other films that come out nowadays. So overall, I was pleased with it. I just wasn't blown away by it.
Yeah, I can echo a lot of that. You know, I think that I had my expectations maybe tampered with a little bit, because I'm guessing you didn't revisit any of the other films leading up to this. I revisited all 4 of them.
Wow.
Because I had that little interim between summer session A and B, and so I watched the 4. And I know, I don't think I'd seen the 4th film before, The Last Key, the one that explored the Lin Shaye character's backstory.
I think that might have been me and Marcia that saw that one.
Yeah, because I know Marcia, shout out to her, we miss you, girlie. She's a big fan of this franchise, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, so it's so funny because the especially the first 2 movies, man, like the first one made over $100 million on like a 1.5 budget. The second one, they upped it to 5 and it made like 160. So this has been a gangbuster of a franchise, and yet I kind of felt a little bit like this as I did with the 5th Indiana Jones, where I was wondering if we really needed it, because after chapter 2, it kind of wrapped up the story of Josh and his family fairly well. Without spoiling things, they implied that they were going to explore a certain villain from the original film, the red hoof dude or whatever, a lot more.
They actually refer to it as the lipstick demon for some reason.
Okay.
You know. But
yeah, because they went nuts for backstory of the old woman who possesses Josh in the second one, and even
quote
chapter
unquote
3.
Old woman.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I was disappointed because I watched those other ones, and so the burden of expectation and comparison and whatnot. But even though it didn't really bring a lot of scares, and I felt tone-wise at times it didn't feel as much like an Insidious movie, I really enjoyed the exploration of the father-son dynamic. I thought that there was a real sweetness to the core of that, and
I agree.
Also, just the rekindling of certain things, the resentment and other aspects, and despite the fact that there is some estrangement with 2 characters, well, actually with a number of characters in particular, when they go into the stuff that happened in chapter 2 with Josh's character being possessed, it kind of makes sense that fragmentation that
I agree
in this film actually happened. And so, especially with the fact that we do get some Rose Byrne in this, I was wondering if she was going to be there or not, but she is for a little bit. And so it was the exploration of that I liked. everything on the college campus, and we'll get into that here in a moment in story, not so much. So I guess it was kind of a mixed bag for me, but I did actually, it's not James Wan directing, but I thought Patrick Wilson in his directorial debut did a pretty solid job. No, not inferior to Lee Winnell directing the third one. And,
Lee Winnell, who's still got a writing credit on this one, and who he and his, he and the other dude from the first three movies, I believe. They do have were they in 4 too? I couldn't remember.
They were.
Yeah, so I love that they had a little cameo. Obviously, Lee doesn't look quite the same as he did back in the day.
I definitely noticed, because even in 3 and 4, and I was just like, some things have changed in just the last few years, which is, hey, it happens.
But now, I mean, he's uber successful, right? He directed The Invisible Man most notably at this point. I mean, he's kicking ass. So more power to him.
First look deal out of that, man.
But it was fun to see everyone come back in varying purposes.
Yeah,
it felt very Kevin Smith in that way.
in a bit of ways, it did, yeah. And so, I mean, our lead kid from the first movie, who's in the coma and everything, Dalton, I think his name was.
Dalton,
Dalton,
Lambert. The Lamberts are their last name. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so it was kind of cool to see him come back and still be kind of a damaged, shy kind of kid. And so I know we can get into some of that in the acting, but so while I did find it a mixed bag, and I still don't think that they've recaptured the amazingness of the first film and the decentness of the second film, I still enjoyed it, because of the fact that I enjoyed this universe. I do like the Insidious universe. So
I agree with you. Forgive me. Hang on, let me cut real quick. Sorry. All right. I agree. I always enjoyed the Lambert family aspect of the Insidious movies. I was a little frustrated when 3 kind of went the prequel route, and then 4 went, it was a sequel to 3 essentially. So I don't know. I wasn't the biggest fan of them getting away from the Lambert family, but they always go back to the red-faced demon at the very end of the movies. So I wanted them to go deeper into that. It wasn't quite necessarily that, but it was a continuation of the Lambert family story-wise. I mean, so yes, you touched on it. Basically, Dalton goes to college, and there's an estrangement in the family between Patrick Wilson's character and Rose Byrne's character, and a lot of it is because of what happened in the second movie. So I do like that there was in-story repercussions for the way things went down in the second movie, which you would think there would be, right? The second movie ends on like we're all going to be okay again. But yeah, I mean, this is a real world situation that's presented here. Like, there are consequences to things. And even though, certain people are smart enough to know what was really going on, a couple of people weren't old enough to even know what was really going on, and that is going to scar some folks. So I like that there was that deeper level of storytelling in this particular case, just because of the story that we're going back to. But I will say that the story, even though there was that deep lore to build on, the story here felt thin. Very, very thin.
I agree. Yeah, hence the mixed bag, mentions and stuff. So that's where I was like, I did want it to delve deeper. And so I mean, props for the exploration of the aftermath of what happened in the second film. But that's where as I mentioned in overall thoughts, I'm like, did we really need this? I mean, because it is very much epilogue, and in some ways it didn't really bring the extent of scares that I think some of the previous installments had. There weren't any like real marquee moments in this one that were written from like a sense of like real tension, none that at least really got me. But
let me hesitate to say that, or I do hesitate to say, but I think this is probably the truth, that this is one of those films that would have benefited from 20 extra minutes of storytelling.
Yes, I agree.
And diving into the ramifications, and let's get deeper with these characters, and have some more fun with the scares, rather than all the scares were very straightforward scares. Nothing new, you know. I personally thought that Insidious and Insidious 2, they had some new things to present. You know, James Wan was creating his own sort of filmmaking persona with those movies, plus Conjuring 1 and 2, and I feel like he developed a cinematic language, and then the next 3 movies now have just sort of been similarly copying a lot of that language, but not innovating on it.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, there's only so many times that I can have someone looking back and forth and then having something crazy happen on one of the looks back and forth, or there's only so many times that something blurry in the background can be getting closer and that's still scary. You know what I mean? Like it's not innovative. It's kind of rote, but it's still effective at times.
Yeah.
Again, I still jumped, but it wasn't because it was a new kind of scare. It's just, you know, they know certain scares that are going to work, and they lean into them at times.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you bring up The Conjuring, because I feel like, not just because of James Wan, but obviously because of Patrick Wilson, the two franchises are kind of forever interlocked to a slight degree with one another. I even, in the early days when I was kind of, like, before I had the pleasure of joining this show with you, man, I was kind of off on horror for a few years there, around, like, when the aughts were starting, you know. I kind of lost interest in the genre as a whole in a lot of ways, and I got Conjuring and Insidious confused, you know. I mean, just because I'd seen bits and pieces maybe at a friend's house or whatever. But I guess the point that I'm meandering around to getting to is that I kind of felt a lot way about this one the way that I felt about The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, where it was really nice to, like, meet up with these characters that I have such an affinity for and a connection with from some really stellar films. But at the end of the day, it felt like it was kind of trying to recreate the magic of a different director with said same characters and not doing as adept of a job.
So allow me to make a comparison that might, like, to the people that say, is this necessary? You know, I would counter with, is every new Bond movie necessary?
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? No, it's just a continuation of a story that a contingent of the audience likes, and they're going to see the continuation of that story. And I think more power to them for it. Let's talk about the acting, though, which I think, I honestly think, again, it's great to see that they brought back the original actors to play all the parts, right? Both of the kids were the original actors, if I'm not mistaken.
They are. And they could easily recast each of them.
Of course, very much could have, after considering as young as they were. But
it's been 13 years since
I loved it. I loved the fact that they all came back, and they came off as awkward teens at times, and that's what they are. They're in the awkward teenage phase, one going into college and one being younger, a little brother. And it was cool to see everyone again. And while it might not have been necessary, it wasn't unnecessary. Do you know what I mean?
I can second that, yeah.
Acting wise though, everyone carried through. There was no weak points for me. Well, I will say Nick the Dick might have been a bit of a weak point. With
the face mask and everything, yeah.
Well, yeah,
His
exactly.
speech that he had, which is funny. The roommate, she had some sweet moments and she had some jokes that landed, and then she had some others that didn't land.
I feel like that relationship could have been written a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely kind of sped along as far as just the kinship and the quickness of it all. But I mean, it's awkwardness. You're at a liberal arts college and so on. Patrick Wilson, he had some vulnerable moments in this, and I gotta, especially with the detachment with his son and how much it was paining him. I thought that was good. And then also,
the scene where he was leaving the college.
Yeah, and you can
as he was walking away and fighting back the tears. I was like, I feel this so hard. Like, my son's nowhere near college age yet, but if we had the interaction that they had and I was walking away, Patrick Wilson pulled it off, bro. He really was. He's a great actor anyway, but
he is.
He just continued to prove it again with this film.
Yeah, and it is an A story, B story that they eventually interconnect, and so I wish we got maybe a little bit more of him. I mean, it was a pretty decent division between him and his sons, different side stories, I suppose. So, but yeah, Wilson was great, and I wasn't sure what to expect from that young kid from the original film, Dalton, all grossed up and whatnot.
All grows up.
You're all grossed up, and you got these teeth and these claws. Yeah, but he was good, man. The other brother, a little more so annoying, but that's how they wrote his character. So
Right.
he's supposed to be younger, a little less mature. He's like, I'm never going
Still
to
the
college.
mama's boy,
Whatever.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, and Rose Byrne, for the couple scenes that Renee had with the Josh character, I could feel the fact that there was still love there, but so much was messed up when Josh went all Jack Torrance in the second movie that you can understand some of the tension within that situation. So
Well, yeah, I mean, imagine that the person that you trust and love, like, spends an entire movie's worth of time trying to kill you and your sons,
yeah.
and then yes, you understand that it's an entity, but that doesn't change the fact that every time you try and be close or intimate, even like you shit like that could flash through your mind, and it's like, yeah, it wasn't him, but it was him. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like, that's
how much of it were you in the driver's side seat for, or whatever? I mean,
well, not just that. I
completely
don't think she would ever have thought that he actually had any control over it, but it was the same face that attacked her. You know what I mean? So, like, that would be really tough. But here's the thing: they could have taken an extra 5 minutes to give us that.
Yeah.
And they didn't. And like, in the interest of brevity, they sacrificed what I think would have been very appropriate character depth and development in this film.
Yeah, and where some people may say the Conjuring films are too long, because those are well over the 2-hour mark.
They take the time to develop the characters.
Yeah, and that is one thing where they did kind of speed along, even with a relatively small cast. It still felt like certain aspects, were rushed. And from a performance perspective, I feel like just about everybody seemed very capable of just enriching that sort of connection and experience for viewers if they had, to your point, a bit more time. So.
Agreed. Filmmaking wise, it was still a very well made film. I think Patrick Wilson did a great job directing. Cinematography was good. Sound design was good. I was glad they didn't use the overly loud violin that they've used in the past Insidious
that they've started
movies.
the films with,
right.
When the logo comes up.
I was grateful for that, because my ears are getting old. But ultimately, all the filmmaking aspects of this were good, and that's not the issue that I had. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And there was a lot of great groundwork already laid by Juan, and then Winnell, and I forget the name of the person who directed the fourth film. I know that they did something else, one or two prominent stuff within the genre, but long story short, Wilson had some good cues to kind of work from a lighting standpoint, from all of this mythology and stuff with the further and everything that's been set up already. So I thought it was good. I liked the artistic aspect that they incorporated in, like, one painting in particular that Dalton does, I thought was pretty rad status, and had some nice menace to it. And boy, that teacher was pretentious as all hell, though. I gotta say, just made me roll my eyes and laugh, dude. Rip up your work. And just like, okay, something I put so much effort into, just
leave the past behind. But then again, who doesn't just snap a picture of their work with their phone when it's done anyway? You know what I mean? But still.
True.
But nonetheless, so, and then let's talk about the effects of it all. It's got to be PG-13.
It is. All of the Insidious films have been PG-13.
Yeah.
So Conjuring versus R, and
it doesn't even really skirt into the gore side of things, like, at all, that I can think of. It's less invasive than the last Key was, with the keys going into people's throat and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was unsettling, and the little twist and the
and
dropped out on that girl
sound going in, going out. So it
Shay character.
It was less interesting than some of the side stories in the franchise, but effects wise, it was fine. I didn't have an issue with any of the CG effects or any of the very sparse gore effects.
Yeah.
These movies aren't movies that necessarily sing because of their effects, whether they be practical or digital. But with
those low budget roots, I mean, they didn't really. it was all about that dread and the ominousness and the power of said suggestion and everything in a lot of ways.
While there was no distraction because of any particular effects, I don't think there was any particular augmentation because of the effects either. So
yeah, they were just kind of there. I mean, there's
they helped carry it through at times.
Yeah, as if we haven't seen enough like big puke scenes, so we got another one of those.
Oh my god, bro! I'm so tired of seeing it.
Yeah. I mean, I was tired of it after Drag Me to Hell, man.
Right, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Like, nobody needs to have their mouth vomited into anymore. It's been done so many times.
I did like in the third act though, where in most of these Insidious movies we get the further with all of these different entities' presences, like you get kind of a pile sort of thing, and there's some cool contortion work that we had. Kind of rad, and just the way that scene was shot and the makeup of those characters, I thought was cool. So they've always held it down throughout pretty much the whole franchise. Anytime those moments, present themselves and whatnot. But I can also second you once again, man. Though, where the effects didn't really derail anything, but they didn't really work to some amazing benefit to enhance stuff either.
Yeah. I did like some of the shooting, like the scenes where people are in complete darkness, but somehow the fog is illuminated by their lantern as they're running around the darkness, and there's enough light to illuminate them and the fog around them at times. I love those shots, and I'm guessing they're more simple to achieve than I'm thinking, or maybe not. Maybe it's a pain in the ass and they have to take out a bunch of extra lights, but I did like that. Like, I have to give credit to that, but that's not really effects per se. That's more cinematography and lighting. Yeah, exactly. So, but ultimately it was an enjoyable experience. I don't think I would rush out to watch it again. I do think if I ever feel the need to rewatch the Insidious movies, I wouldn't have a problem watching 1, 2, 5. Like, I do think it's a whole complete story, and I like that about it. While I agree, yes, this one was not necessarily necessary, it's still cool because it's still a continuation of the story with the same actors, and I'm about that. Whether I'm over the moon about the story or not, I'm over the moon about the fact that everyone came back to tell the story.
Yeah. And I mean, even though I would say it is the weakest of the 3 films that involve the Laird family, that still doesn't. I mean, if you're a fan of this franchise, I don't know if I would say rush out to the theater, but if you're a fan of the franchise, hit up a matinee and go check it out and get what feels like a proper epilogue of sorts. And Jason Blum even said that they're kind of retiring this franchise for the foreseeable future.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. He said that in an interview this past week, which really surprises me because after the third one, kind of went down in box office and only made like 110 or something. Last Key went and made like another 160. So I mean, it shows that there's still viability there.
He says they're gonna take a rest, but they're gonna take like 5 years and then come back. Like, that's barely a rest.
Yeah, because that's all it was since the Last Key. That was 18, I want to say. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but if they do come back to it, I am fine with them just saying this is the end of the family story permanently, and if you're gonna have the paranormal ghost chasers homies or whatever, or more Lin Shaye, I mean, I don't know, I'd be all for it, but I also wouldn't cry my eyes out if they don't make any more of these, because this did feel like a fitting finale in a lot of ways.
Agreed. So yeah, guys, there you go. I don't think it's worth it to do a spoiler section of this one. I think there's
not enough.
There's little enough to spoil that you might as well just go and check it out yourself. But thank you very much for watching, and thank you for hanging out if you've made it this long into the review. Thank you to all of our patrons for supporting the channel the way that you do. Again, we are on the eve of Mad Monster 2023, which means we are on the eve of debuting the early screening of Dylan's New Nightmare. So I have a lot to get through as far as anxiety and stress goes over the next 24 hours, but I do need to crank out this review so it goes up while we're doing everything at Mad Monsters. So,
yep, I got schoolwork to finish too. So there we go. Yes,
so thank you for taking the time to do this, Fuego.
Yeah, man. Most stuff, dude.
So thanks again for watching, you guys. Until next time, I've been Cecil Laird.
And gracias. I mean, Fuego.
And remember, stay scared.